This episode has content that could be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to tonight's tale, presented by Thrilling Mysteries. Evil Clowns. Serial killers. Ghosts and spirits. People are frightened by many things. Some of these things are just tales meant to get your adrenaline pumping. Some of them are real and have a bit more danger to them. Tonight, we are going to explore a tale that many people find to be extremely haunting. A living doll. This one is real, and you can actually visit this doll down in Key West, Florida. Some of you know what, or should I say who, we are talking about. Today, we are going to introduce you to Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll was the childhood friend of Robert Eugene Otto. How exactly Robert received the doll is not 100% confirmed. Some say it was a birthday gift from his grandfather, who purchased the doll in Germany in 1904. Some say it may have been given to him by a neighborhood friend as a gift, or maybe as a curse. And some say it was a gift to Robert from a servant who worked for his parents in their home. Wherever he got it from, it quickly became Robert's new best friend. So much so that he said that the doll's name was Robert, and started asking everyone else to call him Gene. While Robert seemed like an ordinary doll for the time period, it wasn't too long before strange things began to take place. As the story goes, a young Gene Otto, around the age of 10, awoke one morning to find Robert sitting at the end of his bed, just staring at him. Then, just a few minutes later, Gene's mother was awakened by the chilling screams of Gene, as his mother could hear what sounded like furniture being overturned and moved around in the room. When she finally got the door opened, which was locked, she found Gene curled up on his bed, terrified. The room was completely trashed, and the furniture that was way too heavy for a young Gene to move was displaced throughout the room. When Gene's mother tried to ask him what happened, all Gene could get out was, "Robert did it! Robert did it!" So, did Robert do it? Or was this just a young boy lashing out and blaming the doll? If this was a one-time event, maybe so, but this was only the beginning. Gene would often be in his room talking to Robert. His parents would hear giggling and responses during the conversation that clearly wasn't Robert's voice. It wasn't a voice as if Gene was just answering in a different tone. It was a completely different vocal characteristic that a 10-year-old Gene could not make. Gene would often place Robert in the front upstairs window of his home because Robert would tell him he wanted to look out the window. Children would pass by, and they would claim they saw Robert's head turn as they walked past the house, as if Robert was watching them. Gene's parents reported that they would see Robert running up the staircase at night, giggling as he ran back into Gene's room. Many times, Gene would go into his room to get his friend Robert, and Robert would not be where Gene had left him. Robert could usually be found sitting in a rocking chair in front of the upstairs window, looking out at those below. Gene kept Robert even into adulthood. When Gene's parents had passed away, they left him his childhood home in Key West, Florida. The house is now known as the Artist's House, as Gene was an artist and known to be quite eccentric. Of course, a grown man who not only plays with dolls, but treats them like they are living, is certainly eccentric. When Gene and his wife Anne moved into the home, Gene felt that Robert needed a room of his own. Robert told Gene that he wanted to live in the upstairs room with the view out front, as it was his favorite spot to sit. Robert loved watching the people walking down the street. Many times, Anne would find Robert in another room from where he was last known to be left.
Hello.
She would hear voices and footsteps coming from the upstairs as well.
Welcome.
This understandably upset Anne, and she finally convinced Gene to place Robert in the attic and lock the door. This didn't make Robert happy at all. When people would visit the house, they could hear what sounded like footsteps pacing back and forth in the attic. The childlike giggling that people used to report hearing from Robert had also turned more sinister in nature. One day, a group of children came to tell Gene that there was a small boy in the window, mocking them and making fun of them as they walked by. Gene, confused by this, went to investigate. He knew that he had locked the door where Robert was, but to his complete amazement, he found Robert sitting in the rocking chair, slowly rocking back and forth, watching out the window. Each time Robert would get out of the attic, Gene would put him back and ask him to please stay there. That he was sorry that he had to place him there, but the others just didn't understand him. After the Ottos had both passed away, a new owner moved into the home. Myrtle Reuter is the one who purchased the home, and she found Robert the doll in the attic a few years later. She stated that she would often hear what sounded like footsteps in the attic, but just dismissed it as a wild animal up there. When she found Robert, she soon came to realize he was not your ordinary doll. But Myrtle was not scared of Robert at all. She lived with Robert until 1994, and then she donated him to the museum where he lives today. Robert now lives in the East Martello Fort in Key West, Florida, where visitors from around the world come to visit him annually. Robert's mischievous ways are still happening even today. Visitors report seeing his facial expression change and having him watch them as they walk by. They report that sometimes when they go to take his photo, the images become blurred or misfigured. Some even reported that their cameras cease to function until they leave the room where Robert is located. Staff at the museum have reported seeing footprints on the floor's dusty areas at times. They've seen handprints on the inside of the glass where Robert is displayed. His legend continues today. If you are to go see Robert the doll, there are rules you must follow in order to safely visit him. First, you must greet Robert by saying hello to him. He wants to be acknowledged. Second, you must ask Robert's permission to take his photograph. Third, you must always be respectful of Robert. Finally, you must always thank him before you leave. If you do not follow these rules, it is said that Robert will haunt you. There have been thousands of stories by past visitors who did not follow the rules. If Robert does haunt you after you visit and leave, the only way to make it right is to write Robert a letter and apologize and ask him to forgive you. Evidence is seen of this, as there are hundreds of letters at the museum of people who have been haunted and wrote Robert begging him to forgive them. Let's hear some stories now of past visitors and what they had to say about their visit with Robert the doll.
My brother, his wife, and I went on vacation to Key West, Florida. We heard about Robert the doll and decided to pay the museum a visit. I had heard about Robert and the rules he had for the visit. My brother thought it was all a bunch of hype, just meant to scare you. Well, my sister-in-law and I were both very respectful and followed Robert's rules. I was so nervous, I didn't even bother asking to take a photo. But my brother thought it was all silly and was like making little jokes and poking the bear, so to speak. Well, when we returned home from the vacation, my brother's sewer line had been backed up while we were gone and ended up costing him over $8,000 in damages to the home. And then, 6 months later, my brother and his wife got a divorce. Coincidence? I think not.
I went to see Robert the doll at a paranormal convention in Clearwater, Florida. I took several photos of Robert and later uploaded them onto my computer in a folder I label as scary photos. When I went to go make some social media post about my trip, all the photos of Robert were gone. I know they were there, and I did not delete them. Robert has to be the one who made them disappear.
My family and I went to visit Robert the doll in his new home at the East Martello Fort in Key West. Of course, my dad, trying to be the funny man all the time, totally did not follow any of the rules, and even went as far as mocking Robert the whole time we were there. It was embarrassing to say the least. Well, When we left the museum, we had a nightmare of a time as our car transmission blew out. We had driven to Key West from upstate New York, so we had quite a bit of traveling to do. The repair ended up costing us over $6,000. While we were waiting for our vehicle repair, which extended our trip by over a week, we got a call from the animal boarding facility where our dog was being held. We were informed that our dog had suddenly passed away with no real explanation of why. He was happy and healthy the day before, and the next morning, they went in and he was just laying there, lifeless. Then, when we finally got back home, my dad had a massive heart attack and was hospitalized for 3 weeks. When he finally got out of the hospital, he immediately wrote a letter to Robert, begging for forgiveness. After he wrote the letter, nothing else happened since, and that was over 8 years ago. Do not mess with Robert the doll.
These were just a few of the accounts of past visitors who had not followed the rules of Robert. What do you think? Are these stories real, or are they just tales made up to help hype up the lore of Robert the doll? If you have a story about Robert the doll, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section. Like, subscribe, and comment on this video if you would like to see more content like this from our channel. Until then, be kind, because you never know when you might get a curse from your bad behavior.